Hey everyone, what the fuck is going on?
Hello, Ikthano here, the internet's busiest MMA nerd, joined by Tyler Ninja Blevins to answer a bunch of questions from our patrons. Both looking bloated as fuck.
Yeah, we're fat as shit, and we're going to answer some questions of people that's giving us money. So, yeah.
Okay. So this is to just explain the format. This is going to be a monthly thing with a rotating cast. It's not going to necessarily be me and Fenio all the time, but
It's rotating, but it's also always going to be me and Tom.
yeah, it's also always going to be us because no one's fucking available to do anything. But yeah, every month our patrons we're gonna make an announcement, and you're gonna throw us a bunch of questions, preferably through the Discord. If you're not subbed to the Discord, and if you're not still in the Discord, what the fuck are you doing? Get in the Discord. It's very fun. Lots of fun people in there with lots of funny ideas and fun questions, and lots of cool discussions going on in there. And so we compiled a list of the most interesting questions that we received from both the actual Patreon in the comments, although there was only one, I think, and there was a bunch in the Discord. And part of them we answered like partially in the Discord, gave a preliminary answer, and now we're gonna like examine them in depth. Okay, so Fenio, would you please read the first question?
Okay, so first question. Navigator is asking us, what does it mean for a fighter to have a good process in MMA? What's the distinction between a process and a game plan? Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure. I have an answer of my own, but I want to hear your thoughts as well.
Okay, so I think a process is what you do with your skill set and your ability to fight, and how do you put that together to win fights, and how do you use that to get the fight to where you have the best chances to win. And I think that's different from a game plan, because the game plan is just like a selection of tactics and how you use those tactics and technique to put on a winning performance. The process is like more intrinsic to the fighter, I would say. It's more of a fighter can have a good game plan and still have like a bad process as a fighter on his own. So if the game plan fails, he doesn't have a process to go through the fight in an optimal way. Obviously, it's fighting; you can always win via landing some bullshit or anything.
Yeah, it's like an interplay between these things. Like process is just what you do all the time. It's like basically what you are as a fighter. It's like the skills that you have. It's like, I think in an article I once wrote, I said that a process is like a system of ideally complementary techniques that you use from fight to fight in order to win the fight. And,
yeah, exactly.
A game plan is something that you come up with based on the opponent that you face, and you kind of like look at your process and kind of think, what's the best tools that I have in my toolbox that I can use for this specific opponent, and then you kind of figure it out from there.
Yeah, the process is like, what do you default to do with your skills? And your process can be, you can be like very skilled in a lot of areas and do not have a good process, or the contrary, like you might be like a very limited fighter but have a good process going on. And I think the game plan is something that it's like very fight specific, obviously, and it has to consider your process as a fighter when you're making a game plan. I think that's the idea when you're going into a fight. So for example, having a good process, as I said, is taking the fight with your tools to where you're most likely to win. Like if you are a wrestler, having a good process means that you have like good entries for your takedowns. You have like connective tissue between striking and wrestling. And once you're in the ground, you also have the grappling skills to not get submitted, do not get swept on the floor. And a game plan is like what you put together for specifically one fight, and that's and how you're gonna guide your process during that fight in particular.
It's kind of like you look at the guy you say you're a wrestler that has decent kickboxing, good entries, like such and such entries to the ground. Like, for example, you get your guy to the fence and then you throw like a jab to the face and then right straight to the body, and then you go jab to the face and then instead of right straight you go to the legs, that kind of stuff. And then you look at an opponent to figure out, oh, he's kind of good at defending takedowns from such and such positions, but also like in my toolbox I also have this other different takedowns and takedown and other different takedown setup, so I'm probably gonna preferably use that as opposed to my usual setup. And that's kind of like that's kind of the game planning process, like a very easy, like simplistic, stupid example.
Yeah, if you want to like make like a follow-up question on this topic, I think it would be very interesting. But I think in a general sense, we have the thing covered, I would say.
Yeah.
So
the next question, it's not really a question, it's just kind of a nice comment, so I decided to include it. Joanna Dangerfield says, I don't really have a question, I just wanted to say it's pretty cool seeing everything get revamped and the site getting overhauled, and doing it while everyone is super busy and 2 minutes fleeing a fucking war, and that's even more impressive. Good job, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please refrain from making any more compliments for the foreseeable 6 months, otherwise our heads are going to grow to the size of a fucking balloon, like an airship, and we're going to stop making everything altogether, because me and Fenio are extremely unhealthy people that's
very unhealthy,
that's base our entire process on how much of a piece of shit we are, we think.
That sums both of us very well, I would say.
Negative reinforcement is the way to go here.
I mean, all the money is just only contributing for both of us, like being worse persons. Like, thank you very much for that.
So in essence, like people who say that if you are born in a favela, then you're gonna be successful, they are correct. We are an example of that.
My process is getting money and being just like a way worse person every day. Like that's my process as a fighter. And my game plan is getting all the money possible from our patrons.
Yeah, that's essentially it. Okay, so an actual question. Matt Wakefield asks, how important is athleticism in MMA compared to other combat sports or whatever? Or whatever is actually included in the question.
I think the interesting part of this question is that he's comparing it to other combat sports, not sports in general.
Yeah. And
I think MMA being like so diverse in skills, it's like it opens the way for more kind of athletes to be successful, but also gives more avenues to good athletes to be good in MMA without having like very deep skill sets. I would say it also depends on how we describe athleticism. Like it's usually understood in the sense of being like
big,
like explosive, fast, powerful, strong, but also like we have to consider things like cardio and coordination that are very important in MMA.
No one really talks about coordination all that much, because like for combat sports, it's like so many very awkward, weird movements that you don't usually perform.
And we see a lot of the time,
real life.
Yeah, a lot of the time we see guys that are very like obviously very powerful and fast, but are not very coordinated. Like I'm sure you put Derek Bronson to do anything like jumping or running, and I'm sure he's a great athlete. Like he's very powerful, a very strong guy, despite not being here for the weight class. But I wouldn't call him like exactly coordinated. And I mean, he's not terrible, but there's clearly a difference in coordination between like Derek Bronson and Israel Adesanya, for example.
Yeah.
And
or like I mean, I always it's a common talking point for me. I always point to Max Holloway as an example, an extremely athletic individual,
coordinated guy.
Yeah, who is like specific, incredibly athletic, specific to the sport, like durability, cardio, and coordination. Coordination is the most important bits, one of the most important bits of his game. Like the guy can throw a jab to the head, a double jab to the head, a triple jab to the head, followed up by a body shot, and then spin into a kick immediately.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is that?
Also comes to mind like John Jones. He's like a very good athlete for MMA. Like, like some people say like, oh, Jones is not that fast. He's actually like very good in all areas of classic like athleticism. But I think it's very surprising the proprioception that John Jones has. It's like he always knows what his body is doing, even when he's like bullshitting like kicks that he clearly doesn't know how to do. he always ends up in like a good position because he's so aware of his own body. And I think that's one thing that has allowed him to abuse like his long reach, despite not ever developing like a very nuanced jab. But he's still like very hard to get inside because he's very aware of the dimensions of his body and how his body works. Also, he's stupid strong and has like incredible levers, and he knows how to use those very well too. So yeah. Max Holloway and John Jones, I would say, are two very good examples of very good athletes that have like athleticism that is very specific for MMA, not in the classical sense of like Joel Romero, Chad Mendes type of like ball of energy.
Yeah, but to compare to other combat sports, I think like the difference is that for MMA it's more broad.
Yeah,
exactly. Like you said in the beginning, like for boxing, obviously you need to be like a specific kind of boxer in order to be like in order to be a really specific type of athlete in order to be successful in boxing. Like for example, if you don't have good cardio in boxing, then you shit. You will just suck.
Unless you are like a KO machine, but those never like rise to the top except at heavyweight and shit. But yeah, for example, a guy like Jake Shields or Ben Askren would never like make it in boxing. They do not have the athleticism that you need for that sport in a specific. But in MMA, like those guys like that are like incredible cardio. They are actually very strong in static positions despite how they look. And that's something that only comes to play in MMA. I mean, also in wrestling, but not in other sports.
Wrestling,
like
grappling, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And
boxing is kind of like
boxing is kind of like go ahead.
Yeah, it's like boxing is kind of like being able to do lots of mildly explosive motions over and over again while like prancing around, running around. And obviously grappling and wrestling is obviously much more explosive than grappling, but it's still like being able to just clamp down on someone, just and get into it and like maintain that tension throughout constantly over and over again.
Yeah, so one thing like... that I always talk about is like how rule sets like mold different combat sports. And I think, for example, in kickboxing is a sport that overvalues the very explosive athletes just because you only have 3 rounds, even like championship fights sometimes are 5 rounds, but it's still like only 3 minutes rounds. It's super short fights.
Way more kickboxing fights should be 5 rounds.
You gotta sprint in kickboxing because there's not time for doing anything else. Like you cannot. Even MMA is more flexible in that sense because of the longer rounds. Like some like more like low pace strikers that are more calculated have more success in MMA, I feel, overall, than it happens in kickboxing. In kickboxing, especially high level, a lot of guys just go like balls to the wall, taking turns, going like crazy at each other.
It's like fucking like watch any Takedo fight, and it's like non-stop explosions over and over again throughout the entire fight.
Yeah, so I think the difference in MMA is that you have like a larger spectrum of kind of athletes that can be successful, and I think that's what makes the sport so interesting to me.
Yeah. So, Venue, read the next question, please.
Okay, so next question is by our patron, but also our colleague.
Christian, like, why the fuck are you still paying us? You're on fucking stuff. You're releasing content weekly.
I mean, I'm not going to stop you, but also...
also, like, why?
Okay, so Christian says, my question is, how effective is it as a strategy to develop a very high-pitched scream to use when grappling to shatter your opponent's eardrum? Like, say you're in bottom half and you just let out a deafening shriek directly into their ear. What would happen? I think that would be very effective, except that's illegal. I mean,
if
I don't know if we're talking MMA or street fighting. If you're if you're talking street fighting, you might be into something.
If you're in MMA and you're going to do that, you're probably just going to get punched. And in street fighting, if you do that, you're probably just going to get stabbed or something.
That's the main difference. That what would happen in one sport, you get a penalty and also punch in the face. Maybe you get fined too, because those bastards of the athletic commissions will take your money, whatever means necessary. And
we should come up with scream grappling, like grappling with everything else is the same, but also screams are allowed, and then we'll see.
let's unban screams in MMA. Let's make it a thing. Hashtag
the guy with the biggest lungs becomes ADCC champion.
If it's a street fight, you're getting stabbed, maybe the guy like will be very mad because his ear hurts a lot, and he's going to get to his house and he's gonna look at the knife drenched in your blood, obviously, and he's gonna say, "Oh, also, that motherfucker, my ear still hurts." So he's gonna grab a gun and he's gonna find you and he's gonna kill you. That's my prediction.
I mean, in the world of BJJ, everything is possible, like especially gunfights, and also. The example of the bottom half, actually, I think the scream will be more effective from top position because your lungs will be free to expand and you can actually scream. And when you're at bottom, the other guy is like pressing down on you, so you can't.
Yeah, especially if he's a fat bastard. He's a fat bastard. You're fucked. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is like the question that fucking haunts my dreams to this day, like ever since the start of my fucking career. Trotsky Icepick asks, so statistics have become increasingly complex and prevalent across sports over the past several years, several decades. And as analysts, do you think there's potential in MMA or combat sports in general to have the depth of statistical analysis that's seen in basketball, baseball, etc.? Or is it just too chaotic by nature? Similarly, do you think there's much value in the MMA stats used today? Short answer, no. Long answer, no. No. Stats as they use today are not like, do not bear any like substantial weight on how fights should be evaluated at all. And actually, I kind of answered that question multiple times on many different episodes of Tengridome. Actually, let me look up the episodes so I can just list them off so other people can listen to them.
Okay, well, why you look for that? I think there's a bit of value in statistics in MMA, but once you get to the point to be able to use those statistics, is because you already have like a very good understanding of the sport already.
Yeah, it's like you already have all the context for those statistics.
I think those statistics for a person like me, I mean, and that's not like bragging, but I know my shit. I watch a lot of fights, but I think I can make a lot of sense from a statistics, but it's not like in other sports, like where you can start making predictions just based on statistics. That's not going to happen in MMA because they're very like context dependent. So
that's why we hate bettors.
Yeah, you still gotta watch the fights. You still gotta watch what's going on because statistics in MMA do not account for a level of opposition that varies widely in a fighter's career. The sample size is super small as well, but you can still like get some trends going on from the statistics. You can read some stuff. I think like deciding who won a round because of the number of like significant strikes, even if you count them yourself, I think that's wrong. But I think the significant strike is a good statistic if you're not stupid. Sadly, like most people are stupid.
Significant strikes aren't even like actually significant. Significant strikes is basically all the strikes that were landed on the feet. And total strikes is the
ground strikes that are with posture. I think the definition is pretty decent because before like significant strikes, they used to differentiate between like jabs and non-jabs, and that's way more stupid.
Yeah, like boxing does. Like boxing differentiates jabs from power shots, and like fucking a jab can be a power shot.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I mean,
Yeah,
ask
so
ask like Josh Koscheck if he was not hit with significant strikes in his fight with George St. Pierre. I think he
so
will have something to say.
the episodes that I covered statistics in were Tengri Dome episode 9, 10, 19, and 22. So if you want a really in-depth look at statistics, check those out. But to just fire off the main points. Number one, sample size. Other sports feature hundreds of games with set time limits where the game must run for the duration of the time limit.
Exactly.
And MMA, having like 20 fights is already considered a long career. And fights can end at any second. And this results in a limited pool of data to draw from, which increases the importance of using other ways to evaluate fights
and
other than fight metric.
That deforms the statistics as well, because you can say like most knockdowns per minute. And if you're like getting knockdowns and if you're getting like early KOs, obviously that's going to be like super overrated. That doesn't make sense. Like, as I said, you gotta make sense of it. I think watching like statistics from like a particular fight can be helpful. Like, for example, I don't know, like Max Holloway attempted so and so many strikes against Jose Aldo, that can give you some insight. But as I say, you always need context. You need to know who Jose Aldo is. You gotta watch how the fight went on, and then you can use the numbers sometimes to get to some conclusions. I don't think they are completely worthless, but in the sense that a lot of like bettors or people that coming from other sports look at the statistics, that's not going to happen in MMA in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, so like in a game, a point is a point. You kick the ball in the net, you get the ball in the hole, and then fighting, as we said, like there's like significant strikes, jabs, power shots, all that bullshit, and not a single strike is identical to like across different fighters. Fighters are different, and so they strike differently, they punch differently, different attributes, all that stuff. And
the skill sets like change the approach of the fighters all the time.
Yeah.
Like you never see like in NBA or NFL, it's very weird that you see like guys using like a way outside of the box game plan, and that shit happens in MMA all the time. Like guys that are super high volume, like sometimes like feel the threat of the takedown, get paralyzed, stop doing anything. Like there's too much shit going on. Like you can go ahead.
Yeah, there's so much bullshit happening in MMA at any given time, and also like there's the level of opposition as well. Like, for example, a guy gets into the cage and like the commentator fires off a bunch of stats. 97% takedown defense. Like, and the guy just, and the guy never fought a single good wrestler throughout his entire career.
Yeah, for example, in the NBA, or for example in football, or what you degenerates called soccer, every team plays every fucking team. Like, if the statistics make sense because of that, like every year you play everyone in your league. That doesn't happen in MMA. You sometimes go like 10 fights without fighting a wrestler. Some guys go 10 fights without fighting a guy that has good counter punching. So yeah, I mean, you can make use of the statistics. I don't think they're completely worthless, but they need a lot of context. And when you can make use of them, you already like understand a lot of the sport already. I don't think you can go like
by that point you may not even use the statistics anyway.
For sure. It can be useful to make points here and there, but I wouldn't use them to draw conclusions like, okay, this fighter is going to beat this fighter because he attempts more strikes per round. It's like, yeah, don't do that.
Does he land them? Does he land those strikes?
I think the activity ones though are some of the most useful. Like like significant strikes, strikes attempts, takedowns defense. We've been saying like for 2 hours, they do not tell you the whole story, but they can have some value if you have something between your ears.
Yeah, basically, they just have critical thinking, look at the footage, and then and only then you can kind of evaluate that stuff.
Never bet without watching the actual fights.
Like also you have to you really have to study entire careers, really, like fight libraries to just to draw conclusions from, because like for example, you can look at a Max Holloway fight. Like Max Holloway fights a guy, and the guy like lands 500 punches on him, and Max returns like 1,500 punches, and Max Holloway is like completely unhurt by gigantic bombs. And the guy, like, you watch that one fight, and then you go to the comments and say that, oh, the guy that Max Holloway fought is pillow fisted. He can't fucking hit. Like he didn't even knock him out. And the guy that Max Holloway fought was fucking Jose Aldo.
Yeah, for sure.
Just watch the library if you want to study a fight.
Too much context all the time.
Yeah, it's just it's a lot. It takes a lot of time and a lot of critical thinking to kind of like understand what's happening. Anyway, moving on. Fucking statistic, Jesus. Okay, so again, Matt Wakefield has another question, and this time he asks, I've been thinking about what's the minimum viable skill level that a fighter should have to be considered like good, and what are those skills in your opinion?
I think let's start with like very basic outline. Like obviously, like being good, it's like something very subjective. Even though we talk about it, like it's a very like black and white shit because we're assholes. And but yeah, I think for a fighter to be good, let's pretend there's like a clear definition for being good. There is not.
There's the way I kind of break that down is like being good for a division and being good like.
Overall,
overall, I guess. There's also being good kind of like in the context of the meta, of the sports meta, and then being like objectively good with the techniques. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can get into. So
I think
your mileage may vary.
Vary. I think there are some stuff that if you don't know how to do, you're bad. I think that's we can all agree on that. I mean, the sport has been alive for enough that everyone should know a few things. Like if you never grab an underhook when you're presented with a takedown, you're bad. Okay.
Yeah. If you don't know how to whizzer, you're bad.
You cannot whizzer. You cannot like pummel for underhooks. You're bad and you're stupid, and you should feel bad too. Like not bad like a bad person. Like you should feel bad, like sad. Because
if you can throw a 1-2 from range and not from 500 meters away, you're bad. That kind of stuff.
Like, I think to be good, like first you should not be like clearly incompetent in any area of MMA. It's not like if you like trip against a jiu-jitsu guy, even though like your defensive wrestling is very good, like, but if you trip and the jiu-jitsu guy gets on top of you and you get like submitted immediately, like then you're not good. Okay.
So basically, like to kind of codify that stuff, I guess, is you kind of have to have basic kickboxing, kind of know how to like throw a 1-2, maybe a low kick. That's kind of like the minimum viable striking that you should have. Kind of know how to cover up at least the double forearms guard, and kind of know basic grappling, so not being insta-subbed by dumb bullshit, like fucking not getting buggy choked, I guess.
Yeah, like if you're gonna shoot like a single with your head on the inside, like at least know how to defend a guillotine.
Yeah. So it's kind of like an unsatisfying answer, but listing off all the techniques would take fucking forever. But to just kind of basically outline it, you kind of have, like you said, you need to be not incompetent in any single area. If you're like just shockingly incompetent in one area, then you're probably not good.
Yeah, and that makes you like not bad. If you want to be good, like you have to be like decent, at least decent everywhere. You need
good
to have
in one area.
Yeah, you need to be good, act like actual good in one area, and you need to have tools to take the fight in that one area. Like it doesn't, for example, let's take Mackenzie Dern, for example. She's not bad, I would say. She's not terrible. She's not a bad fighter, but I wouldn't consider like good, like in the sense that you can watch her and see, okay, that's a good fighter. Because she has a very dangerous skill set in one area, and her game doesn't lend to get the fight to that place. Like she can get takedowns against lower level opposition, but she doesn't have flexibility with the takedowns. She doesn't have good entries, and the wrestling is like, it's not as bad as people say. Like she's pretty strong in the clinch, has a few tricks, but still, if like that's all you know to do, like at least get like some good clinch entries. So I would say you need a bit more than that. You need to having a good process, as we talked on the first question, is like very important to being like a good fighter. Like you're decent everywhere.
There's also,
you have one area that you're good, and you can take the fight to that place.
That kind of like I kind of thought of another criteria, which is if you're faced from a weirdo from the regionals, even if the weirdo from the regionals is extremely weird, you'd still smash him, just because you're kind of like just on a higher level of competence across all disciplines, and not just like completely useless in one area, and you kind of like that weirdo kind of specifically tailored to exploit that weakness. So you should, if the other fighter is less competent than you in most areas, you should probably smash him and not get like, get stalled out boringly, or kind of like outstruck in a boring fashion. Those kind of like other things.
And obviously like good fighters can lose like very clearly to other good fighters. That's like obviously you're sometimes gonna get outclassed in an area, and there's not a thing you can do about it. That doesn't mean you're not good. Like we're talking about like having a good skill set. Like if you're smashing like fighters that are not good, like consistently, like you're a good fighter. Like we saw, for example, how Universals like lose that fight to Victor Henry, and he was like clearly, I mean, he was winning at the first, and then he got drugged. He lost all 3 rounds. But you can tell like he still had a process going in the fight. He was still in the fight, like trying to win. And then we saw him fight against like Trevin Jones in his next fight, completely smashed the guy. Like that's a good fighter. Like a good fighter doesn't mean that you can never lose, that you can never like, you will sometimes get smashed, even being like great, that is better than you.
Yeah. And it's not even about performing all the techniques correctly, or like
exactly,
being mechanically perfect. It's just knowing what you're good at, kind of knowing what you're doing in most areas, and basically that's it. It's and like having kind of that's basically like not being bad, and being good is actually elevating that and kind of coming up with a process, recognizing your strengths and figuring out ways to get to the area of strength. That's where you start becoming, actually good. But there's also obviously like being good for a division, which is like another topic in itself.
Yeah, we're not getting into that, right?
Yeah, it's like there are divisions that are fucking bad. Yeah, everyone in there is bad.
Yeah, good for heavyweight. It's like a phrase for a reason. But the last thing is that a good point to talk about is the technique. I think technique is like one of the least important things when it comes to determining if someone is good. Like fighting is not about like throwing with perfect technique, it's about winning. I think bad technique can be bad to a fault. A lot of fighters,
there are
a lot of fighters would be a lot better if they had better punching mechanics. But most of the time, if you're fighting with good tactics, that overcomes bad technique a lot of the time. Obviously, there's, as I just said, there comes a point where technique is so bad that you cannot make up for it. But I wouldn't say that like a fighter is bad because he punches like wrong. I mean, we're just talking about Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and like there's a lot to fix in her kicks, in her punches. Like mechanically, but but the tactics are so smart and so well put together, and also like she uses like the limitations of her technique to her advantage. Like she doesn't like has like very powerful like one punch knockout because she flays her arms too much flailing of the elbows. She doesn't like set her feet very well when punching, but she like makes up for that with excellent positioning, with very fast combinations, because she takes advantage of the fact that she doesn't like need a lot of settling to punch. So she just fires like very quick combinations, and I would say like no one would argue that Joanna is not a good fighter. And there's still a lot to fix technically, but she makes us for it in the tactical area, in the IQ area, and all of that. So yeah. Okay, so what's the next question then?
Can Spencer, another staff member who also keeps paying us, asks, can good people do bad things?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, next question. Fucking another staff member question. Like, for fuck's sake, like, Jesus. I mean, I guess it makes sense that they're the most active ones because they actually like really interested in combat sports and all that bullshit. And the shame on you, every other subscriber that did not ask us stuff, because fucking our own staff members have to pull for you. Anyway, Miguel asks, can you explain the differences tactically and strategically between pace fighters and pressure fighters in MMA? I feel like they often get confused, and it could be good to just give a quick overview. And I'm particularly interested in what specific tactics/moves may serve one style over the other.
I want to go.
Basically,
yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Basically, it's warmers versus pressure fighters. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the pace versus pressure. The most important thing is what do they want? In like very broad sense, the pace fighter wants to keep exchanging with you. That's the whole thing. That's what they want. It's to keep the activity very high, to wear you down, to make you commit mistakes, and that's what they want. The pressure fighter is more concerned with taking the initiative and the direction of the fight. I would say they are more concerned, especially with how space inside the cage or the ring works. So obviously we talk all the time about pressuring and cutting the cage. The pressure fighter wants you to put your back against the cage, to force you into making certain moves. The pace fighter is not as concerned with that, because the weapon is the cardio, is the constant action that makes you makes you tired, makes you make mistakes. Both you can be both. You can be like a pressure fighter that's very concerned about keeping the pace high, but you can also be like a pressure fighter that is not very high volume. You can be a counter puncher pressure fighter. So they're not the same. There's a lot of overlap, but they're not the same. Two examples that I go for pace fighters in MMA would be like Max Holloway and Prime Tony Ferguson. Both guys that are not very concerned about getting your back against the cage, but are very concerned about keeping activity going all the time, I would say. On the other hand, like pressure fighters, on the other end of the spectrum, you have like, for example, Prime Robbie Lawler was like a pressuring counterpuncher. Conor McGregor on his featherweight run as well. There are guys that are very concerned with moving you to the edge of the cage, to manipulate your movements, and then get reactions out of you for them to counter. They are very different in that sense, that they can be high pace if given the chance, but that's not necessarily what they want. What they want is to get complete control of the initiative of the fight, and then make you make mistakes. Ferguson and Holloway, on the other hand, I would say are more concerned about keeping the action going, wearing you down cardio-wise, and making you like falter under the pressure. Even though I'm describing them not as precious fighters, but you get my drift. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like Petr Yan is also an interesting example because he doesn't like he's not super reliant on the cage. Like early on, he mostly like only found offense on the fence, but these days I'd say he's got better, and now he's mostly concerned about the initiative specifically because he does not take the initiative through volume. He takes the initiative through kind of like always taking superior positioning, and that's kind of like the most important bit about pressure fighting, which is always putting yourself in a position where you kind of leave the opponent only a couple options as opposed to a whole bunch of options. Like you kind of know what they're gonna do. Like they're gonna move one way. I'm gonna fade like against Sandy, against Sandhagen. When Jan fought Sandhagen, he would switch in one stance and then kind of like give a look that he's gonna like, oh, I'm gonna now I have these such and such strikes that I'm gonna attack you with. And Sandhagen, obviously, he's smart and he recognizes that, so he kind of expects that. And Jan would feint and then switch stances again and then hit from a different direction. And that's kind of the type of positioning and fake outs that you kind of use when you're more concerned with initiative overall than just pace. And yeah, and the way I would characterize it is that a pace fighter obviously is kind of like he drags the initiative and through brute force. Like I'm gonna just throw more than you, and that's how I'm gonna take my initiative. And a pressure fighter can take that initiative. He primarily takes that through positioning. He can also use volume, but primarily it's positioning. It's like eating away at the space that's available to you, and then that leaves you with only a couple options for exit. And then the pressuring opponent can kind of predict what you're going to do and then punish you from there. So the specific tactics and moves that may serve one style over the other. Well, obviously, with the case of pace fighters, it's lots of jabs, lots of front kicks, lots of linear strikes, that kind of stuff. And with pressure fighters that kind of like eat away at space, it's more about, I'd say, intercepting strikes. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think strikes that attack space are very valuable to pressure fighters, like round kicks, hooks, things that catch you when you're trying to circle out, because circling out is the only option you have left. And on the other hand, like pace fighters, they like their long weapons, and they also but both guys, and obviously there's overlap, both guys like the body work a lot. It's very useful. If you want to see a fighter that has a lot of overlap between pace fighting and pressuring, I would say Paulo Costa is a guy that it's first a pressure fighter because he really wants to have your back against the cage, but also like he's very concerned about landing volume on you constantly. That's something that is very important to him, and someone that it's actually pretty good at attacking space when people are circling, especially with the roundhouse kicks. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overlap, but they're not the same for sure. I think we have explained that pretty well.
In boxing, an interesting example of overlap would be, I'd say, Vasily Lomachenko, because he is obviously he throws a ton of volume all the time, but he also pressures really well and he cuts the ring very well. But since he's not like a thunderous puncher, he has to kind of like constantly pour it on you, and he constantly feints, constantly throws lots of strikes, and he kind of has every punch in the book in that regard. He puts you back, makes you go backwards with jabs and straights, and then once you're along the ropes, he kind of fires off hooks, fires off uppercuts, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's basically the divide. It's kind of tricky. It's kind of annoying to deal with, because especially like in the UFC commentary and commentary in general, they constantly talk about oh, the pressure is so high. Like, for example, Keita versus Giga Chikadze. Keita just goes forward and throws lots of strikes, and the commentary
Keita
goes like,
was more concerned about pace than pressuring for sure in that fight. Like,
yeah.
obviously the word pressure by itself means a lot of stuff. I just fell into the mistake of using it out of context, but yeah, it's mostly that. For example, I would say another like interesting thing to talk about this topic is that, for example, Nate Diaz, I would say it's more of a pace fighter, and Nick Diaz more of a pressure fighter. I think that's one of their big differences, is that Nate not as good as bombing against the cage, but likes to keep the high activity. He's a better boxer out in the open for the same reason, but Nick is like way better at putting combinations together when he has you when he wants. So that's if you watch both the fights, especially because they have like such similar styles in the sense of like technique and shot selection, they are very, very similar. But if you want to like see like the difference in the process of a pace fighter and a pressure fighter, I would say watch the Diaz brothers and try to notice what the differences are.
Yeah, and that's not getting into like pace wrestlers and pace grapplers.
Yeah, for sure.
Like pressure wrestlers and pressure grapplers.
Yeah, I think
like
wrestlers are usually like described like as pressure fighters no matter what, and I think that's like very wrong sometimes. Like,
yeah,
Rogan always all the time is like, oh, the pressure from this wrestler is like, I mean, obviously, like if you're gonna use the word pressure in the most liberal sense, any guy that it gets top control, it's pressuring you. But that's not how we use the word in combat sports.
And Khabib is frequently described as a pressure wrestler, and he kind of
more of a pace wrestler, actually.
More of a pace wrestler. Yeah, it's like,
I mean, obviously he liked the cage a lot, but it's because most of the time, like guys put themselves in the cage against Khabib. He just wanted to wrestle like at all costs. He wasn't as concerned with pressure. I mean, he was decent at pressuring, but what he actually wanted was like a good chance to get to wrestle. He was more concerned with that getting your back against the cage.
A really good example would be his fight against Edson Barboza, where he didn't like put him back to the cage with jabs, put him back to the cage with front kicks and that kind of stuff. Basically, just ran at him. It was like, fuck you, and ran at him.
And when Barboza used his tools, like for example, the few times like he pivot out of strikes, and like he really like exposed in a way the Khabib as a pressure fighter, because he was like making him look stupid a few times there. But then it was the pace that got to Barboza, and it wasn't the pressure. Like it was the pace. It was the constantly defending like actually broke him, I feel.
Yeah. And that's a good like example of the big difference with pace fighters. It's as you said, the pace gets the opponents. It tires them out. They cannot keep up with you. They cannot keep up with all the bullshit that you're throwing at them. Meanwhile, with pressure fighters, you're kind of like setting up traps.
Yeah,
kind of like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Another very important thing to notice is that you can keep the pace up when you're on the back foot. That's something that you cannot do as a pressure fighter. Like if you're walking back, you're not pressuring. But for example, like you see both Jose Aldo fights against Holloway and Raoni Barcelos fight against Victor Henry that I just watched. That's why I have it in my mind.
Tony Ferguson, RDA, also a good example, I'd say.
It's fights where it was Aldo, Raoni, and RDA, the fighters that were clearly like trying to walk down the other guy, but it was the other guy that was keeping the pace up, because they were making sure to extend combinations out of the comfort zone of their opponents and filling the gaps between like combination and combination, especially because all three fighters like Aldo, Raoni, and RDA are very like exchange to exchange fighters, and they were like broken down by the filling of the gaps and the constant like activity. It was the activity, it was not the pressure. It was like the volume, but effective volume and meaningful volume, especially when they were not like comfortable receiving it.
Yeah, And there are different ways you can achieve that pace. If you're a pace fighter fighting a guy who cannot deal with the pace, obviously you can just outland him, and that would be fine. But a sign of a really good pace fighter would be, I'd say, keeping up with a really good opponent in the pocket constantly in combinations. Like, okay, I'm gonna throw a couple, like a whole bunch of 1-2s, and he's gonna like find the counter. I'm gonna expect that counter and then counter the counter. And the deeper the exchange goes, and the better the pace fighter is, then that's where the other fighter starts breaking down.
Yeah, one tool that you see a lot of like pace fighters use very well is like finishing combinations instead of with the jab, instead of with the left hook, finish them with the jab. Because it's like when the fighter,
just to keep it going.
When the fighter is trying to like get out of range, you just keep the jab going. You just keep the jab going, and that's what breaks a lot of fighters. It's like they do not have a comfort zone after combinations. It's a very good tool, actually. It's very cool.
Yeah,
but I think
it's really cool.
We've talked about this question a lot already. It was a good one, though.
Yeah. So Joanna Dangerfield once again actually has a question this time. Why do you watch combat sports?
Go first.
Because fighting is cool.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay, moving on. Yeah, but seriously, yeah. But seriously, I don't know. It's kind of been, for me personally, it was always kind of a fascination because my grandfather was a wrestler and my uncle was a striker, and they kind of like always they always watched tournaments and fights and wrestling tournaments, kickboxing, boxing. They always watched that, always argued back and forth between each other, and it kind of like made me interested. What are they talking about? And then they kind of like started instructing me once I got older, and that's just basically like a lifelong interest. But the actual reasons, I would say that like the actual reasons, I think I outlined very extensively in the article called World of Hurt, where I talk about how fighting is kind of like a really raw experience in the sense that it kind of reveals you like who the person is in the moment, in the fight, or like the inner turmoil, like trauma, personality traits, quirks, that all everything about that person is just revealed through how they conduct themselves in the ring or in the cage. And it's the one place where I would say violence can really be kind of not beneficial, but I guess constructive or informative, in the sense that people from all across the world can get into it, and it can actually serve like as a real instrument of social mobility. And if it becomes more popular, and if it grows, and if it becomes less rinky-tink than it is right now, then it can be really something like great, really something good for the society. I think that's kind of like why I have this real invested interest in this whole thing. I mean, I'm an example of that, and you're also an example of that.
Yeah,
we're kind of making money from talking about fights, and we're both from regions where most of the jobs are shit and they pay extremely poorly. So
yeah, we're united by fighting. I think for me, growing up, I grew up. I mean, I'm from South America, but we pretty much get everything like from Western culture, and I think I grew up in an era that you saw like violence being romanticized a lot, especially marketed for kids. Like I grew up like watching like shonen anime and fighting games on the Super Nintendo. So what my idols when I was little was like Goku from Dragon Ball Z and whoever was my favorite at Street Fighter at the time. Obviously I like Ryu and Ken, but then I like other fighters. and Mortal Kombat and all that cool shit. Like so yeah, I mean, it was like, for me, it was always presented like fighting is this cool thing that men do. And growing up, I was like is there anything like resembling like an actual martial arts competition? And that's how like reading and stuff, I knew about K1 and started watching fights, and then K1 like brought me to Pride, and I got enamored like watching like Fedor clips and Vanderlei and Shogun and that kind of shit. And that was like, this is the thing that I was looking all my life when I was a kid that was obsessed with fighting. and yeah, I mean, it as Tumen said, I also agree, like it turns violence that is such a like a bad thing overall. Like it's the only context where violence can be like a beautiful thing, because
it's like the only place where violence is okay, first of all, and also
because
like inspiring.
It's hopefully consensual between two adults. not always the case, but let's not get into that right now. But and I think it's and then I got interested in fighting like in MMA because of that, because of growing up watching all this like martial arts like inspired shit. But then what enamored me with MMA was also like the amount of like different expressions that you can see, like the variety, the amount of different styles. I think it's very interesting how fighters like don't get an option but to express themselves in such a raw and primal way once they're inside of a fist fight. And I love that. I mean, that's the thing that I think it's the coolest in the world.
Yeah, it's like, it's actually, like you said in the beginning, like fighting is something that is a cool thing that men do, and I think it's kind of like an aspect that's shared by both like the Russian culture and the Siberian culture, whatever, and in South America, like masculinity is always like romanticized.
For sure.
It's like, yeah, you have to be a man, you have to be a tough dude, and you gotta train and fight in order to be a man. And when you actually watch real fighting, there's all sorts of people from all walks of life involved, and it kind of, actual fighting is kind of like an antithesis of that romanticization of fuck, I can't pronounce that word, of that elevation of masculinity, of that propaganda ideal of the real man, because women fight.
Yeah,
some of them are really good at it. There's all sorts of like weird nerds that are into like stuff like tabletop RPGs fighting. There's LGBT people fighting, and seeing that all those people train and fight and kind of like engage in this really violent and harsh, extremely hard activity, it's kind of like a debunking of this myth that fighting is only this thing that's only men should do and only tough badass men can do. Because it's kind of, I think it's a really it can be a really beautiful unifying example where people can relate to everyone and find people they relate to, and kind of bridge the gap between prejudice and misunderstanding and all that other hippie bullshit that I can say about it.
No, but it's true. I think it's very cool that like there's clearly a lot of bad people in MMA.
Yeah.
But I think but when it comes to fighters, I think they are all like a little bit less bad because they are fighters. Like they learn to train with different people than their own.
Mm-hmm.
There a lot of fighters, especially for example in ATT, like a lot of guys come from like very like misogynistic countries, and they just had to learn to respect the girls because they see them training every day and grinding just as hard as they are. A racist eventually will have like a black teammate, and they'll have to respect them because they don't have another option. And I think the social aspect of MMA is just a very cool bonus to the coolest sport to me. Like it's like a lot of guys are bad, but they are a bit less bad thanks to MMA, I'd say.
And like historically, like across all combat sports, like for example, if you get into the history of boxing and how black fighters were mistreated and were able to break through that color barrier and like became worldwide icons of the sport and just like humanity overall, like people like Muhammad Ali, who are still considered to be like one of the greatest humans in history, not just like athletes. I think that's the real avenue that combat sports really offer. And I think not to like kind of disparage other sports, but I think fighting kind of has this more primal aspect to it, because it's like people actually like investing, people actually fucking fighting.
Anyone can actually relate. Anyone can relate to a fight. Even if you're never like been involved in like a physical altercation, you can relate to what a fight is, because we've all have fought once in our lives, at least once, against anything.
Yeah,
except like, billionaires. Fuck those motherfuckers. But
it's not even like physical fighting. It's basically like the struggle of it.
This is a struggle. Yeah, it's like such a beautiful representation. Like every fan of every sport say, oh, this sport is such a representation of life. I would say there's no sport like combat sports that does that better. Yeah.
It's like
like a lot of guys like the life is like football, the life is like lifting, and no, the life is like a fight.
Life is like kicking a ball in the net.
Yeah.
Like, come on,
dude.
Life is not running for 90 minutes. I'm sorry, it just isn't.
Life is getting blanketed by a Division 1 wrestler.
The class struggle is like being blanketed by Khabib, and every time you try to change position and like grow and find like a new career or like find a new job, Khabib fucking starts punching you in the face and gets you into a new worse position. That's basically it. That's the moral of the story here. Life sucks. Life is like being beaten by Khabib.
Yeah, life is getting your ass beat by Khabib. That's it.
On this inspirational note, let's get into the next question.
Yeah. So we have a question by
life is trying to flee Russia during the invasion of Ukraine from Putin, and Putin sends Khabib after you. He finds you in your new apartment, beats your ass.
Life is commission stuff for us in coffee.com.
Life is missing weight by 20 pounds, shaking on the scale, passing out, being half of your purse taking out, and then being humiliated by a guy that's half your size.
That's life. That's life.
That's life. That's life.
Life is kicking a ball into your net.
Life is standing naked on the scale because you're so overweight you can't actually like make weight without wearing pants, and the guy holding the towel is just engaging. He like shakes it and everyone sees your tiny dick
to show your dick to everyone. Okay, read the Jonathan Garcia question, please.
Okay, so Jonathan Garcia. Hi guys, first time commenter here. Hello. But a long time patron. First off, I just wanted to say that I greatly appreciate the new kickboxing podcast that is now being provided, which is the Rolling with the Thunder podcast hosted by Spencer. Check it out on our podcast network. Pleasantries aside, now to the question at hand. With the exponential rise in popularity surrounding MMA as a whole, naturally we can expect it to become more inclusive as time passes, leading to the development of increasingly experimental deviations of the original concept. Would it be better for a fighter to have 2 more arms or 4 more legs? So basically, he's basically asking if there's going to be genetic modification involved in MMA.
Yeah, he's asking. You were more of a Goro guy or of a Motaro guy?
But yeah,
Oh,
to like seriously, I think yeah, with the globalization, like sure, like more countries are gonna like get into MMA. I at least I hope, from like different countries, from countries that are very badly represented in the sport today.
yeah.
Yeah, like poorer countries and that stuff.
And
And
you see
this
when
is
and you see like even like small countries, they get 1 star and the sport explodes. Like we're seeing like a bunch of fighters from Ecuador right now that's all Cheeto. Like
yeah,
like they do not have the infrastructure. They just want to be they
they
just
want
want
to
to
be
be
like Cheeto.
Cheeto. Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
presumably there's a bunch of guys from Cameroon right now training in
Yeah,
like in the
they're on
garage,
they're
wanting to
coming
be like
up.
Francis.
They're coming up for sure.
But would it be better for a fighter to have 2 more arms or 4 more legs? Well, answer the question. Answer the actual,
Uh,
the most important
answer
question.
the important part. Yeah. So obviously arms are more like skilled. You can do like more stuff, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like you would be so strong with 4 legs, like 6 legs. Holy shit! But that's a lot of leg locks that you gotta defend.
Imagine you can basically like make combos with kicking combos with legs. You can stand on 2 legs and then kick with the other 4. Like
Yeah, maybe you
that,
can
that,
like develop like very good like dexterity with the other legs because you don't need them for walking, or maybe you do
yeah.
need them for walking and you're
It depends on
like
the body
fucking
composition. It depends.
octopus. Yeah.
It depends on if you stand like this or you like this.
Would a would a dog wear the pants like this? Would a dog that is an MMA fighter use his Reebok fight kit like this or like this? Oh
But
fuck,
yeah, so
it's Venom
in
right now.
increasing the experimental deviations of the original concept, I'm not sure what that means. Is that like uh what's that, like different variants of MMA, like arm wrestling MMA,
I have
chess
a
MMA?
question. I have a question for Jonathan Garcia. What if like there's like your generic shonen anime, right?
Hmm.
And one guy learns to wrestle. does does Division 1 Vegeta beats the shit out of Goku? Yes or no?
It's like uh fuck, I remember like really actually, like if you look at any like um work of media where there's fighting involved, it's always striking.
Yeah.
Almost always like 90% striking.
And you
There's
see
barely
real
any grappling
fights,
in wrestling.
there's always grappling. They
There's like
always slowly go to the ground.
yeah, there's a manga called Holy Land that's is critically acclaimed and everyone talks about it being realistic. However, there's also a moment in it where a wrestler like fights the main character and the main character goes, "Oh, he's more limited on the streets because there's actually like concrete and he can't do his usual leg attacks because he's gonna scrape his knees." Like, motherfucker.
He's going to break your head on the concrete. Like what you
Have you ever even like fell on the ground, just kind of like tripped and fell on the ground on solid concrete?
No, but he can scrape his knees, so yeah.
And
Better
also
think
like
about that one. Better
it's
think
not like a
about that one
freestyle
twice.
wrestler can also throw hip throw or like do upper body throws. Like
No. It's all double legs going completely to your
it's
knees.
only doubles and singles. It's not like you can do a double on an untrained wrestler
It's
without
that
going to the knees.
it's that very shitty like jiu-jitsu double leg, like when you go to your knees before like finishing the takedown.
Even if you just bend at the waist and like tackle the guy, you can still like kill a person if you drop them on their head on concrete. Come on. So yeah, I'm sorry, Jonathan. I kind of like didn't get the second portion of the question, which is increasingly experimental deviations of the original concept. Like maybe like offering different
like
rule sets, like allowing
like
headbutts
X
again.
like X arm. or like
We're not,
chess boxing.
we're not laughing at you or at
No.
your questions.
No,
We're
no,
just, yeah.
we're loving you. We're loving your question. I love it. Like, thank you, thank you so much. Like, I'm very sincere here. I'm having a blast talking about this. Also, like about the guy with 6 legs. How the fuck do you take that guy down? Like, he
It's
can just.
impossible.
He always posts with the other leg. Like, you're fucked.
Even if you have a third leg or like a tail, like a kangaroo, you're already pretty much impossible to take down. Only if you like pick them up and completely throw them overhead, like I don't know, a strong man. That's the only way you can.
Yeah,
take
I want everyone to have a lot of legs so we can get rid of the wrestling part.
Yeah, we can get rid of the wrestling part and turn MMA into a strongman competition, into a caber tossing competition. That's the experimental deviation.
Yeah, just a lot of guys built like Squidward fighting each other. That's what I want.
Guys built like Octodad. Okay.
Do we move on to the last one?
Yeah, the last one is gonna
It's
be
2 questions. Yeah.
It's 2 questions and one of them is really big. And actually, come to think of it, I think it can be an entire episode in itself. But we kind of touched upon some of the themes in it. Anyway.
Yeah, let's see if it's like really going long. Like, we can actually like record a podcast for that. But let's go into it. Yeah.
Big Old Bear 88 asks, so I have 2 questions, one short one and one a little longer. The first one is, what are some indicators of a good defensive fighter in MMA, and how has defense evolved throughout the years, especially the last decade or so? So that's we can answer this one right now. And the next one is a little heady, but how do you think a country or region's culture and history influences the development and creation of various martial arts, MMA included, and also the kind of tendencies or trends fighters from said countries or regions could possibly develop based on their region or country of origin? I guess it adds to the theme. I guess to add to the theme, a little bonus question is, that's actually 3 questions, you fucker.
A little sneaky one there.
Yeah. How do you think the sort of globalization of the world has changed the ways fighters develop across regions and countries? Yeah, we kind of touched upon some of this stuff, so I guess we can
but
provide a short answer right now, and then
it would be cool to touch on that one for a full length, because it's a very cool topic. Maybe we can bring someone else. But I think it's a very cool topic, especially for both of us that come from like such different places in the world, that it
different
still have
places
some
in the world and like fucking bump up nowhere.
Yeah, but still have some similarities. Like, but let's answer the first one. Indicators of a good defensive fighter in MMA. I think the most like the thing that has changed about defense in MMA is that it's all about layers. It's like you gotta have like different layers of defense. And you have layers, but not also layers, not only layers, but also like having a system to defend yourself. And I think that's what's been changing. We've seen a lot of fighters having like cohesive defensive systems nowadays. There's still a long way to go, but it's very different now than it used to be. I think especially when it comes to having like defense that lends itself to defend both wrestling and striking.
Yeah, and it also allows you to come up with counters once you defend.
Yeah, I think the layers of defense, if you wanted to describe it in a way, first you have distance. That's always your first layer of defense. If you're not there to be hit, then you're evading an attack. Then you have like a static movement. That is when you evade staying in your place. Head movement is obviously the most of it accounts for most of that, but also like lifting your leg and let like a leg kick like pass through. So evading, like movement that is on the place. Then you have like parrying and deflecting. That is when you take a strike and you redirect the energy somewhere else. Then you have a blocking that is like your last like layer of defense. That is when you brace yourself and cover the important parts of you with, for example, you block your head here with your elbow, you block your ribs with your elbow, you check a kick, all of that is blocking. And then you have like the counters and reactive takedowns and all of kind of stuff that it's also defense in a way, but incorporates a little bit of
clinch, tying up.
Clinch, tying up especially, and also you need like defense obviously in the clinch, in wrestling scrambles, but yeah, and a system is that you're always aware of what layer is being invaded, and you have like options to move from there. Like, okay, this guy close on me, so distance is not a layer of defense that I have available anymore. So what do I do now? Can I move my head? Yes or no? Can I block? Can I parry? And you have like movements that you can chain together in a way that doesn't leave you out of position and therefore exposing your defense. I think that's if you can put that together into a I think that makes sense. You're a good defensive fighter in MMA, and I think the evolution has been very big in the last decade or so. I think fighters in MMA were very reliant one in defense, and one thing that was very like very distinctive of MMA many years ago was that fighters were bailing out of exchanges all the fucking time. It still happens more than in other sports, especially because there's more dangers to be aware of in MMA. But yeah, I think we see more fighters like staying their ground and defending in place instead of just like going back. We see more like pivots and stuff like that. And also like we've seen a lot of evolution in head movement, in more active ways of blocking, not just like the static high guard. So yeah, I think it's been very interesting.
Yeah, and to just reinforce your points, like used to be, because in MMA you have to like account for so many threats, people just stood way the fuck back in order to kind of like give themselves space and give themselves time to react. And it used to be, it's like you said, people would bail out of exchanges. And so my answer would have been to just, if a fighter does not just rely on distance to defend themselves, that's probably already a hint that they're pretty competent at defensive reactions. At least they're functional. They're not just doing a Gustafsson every time you move forward, like just jumping like 5 feet backwards just because you threw a jab. That's a good hint. And then like having cover-ups and all those layers basically covered everything. The one thing that I would like to add is like, if it's already like a sign of an elite fighter, having all those layers in terms of defense, but also if you can find offense throughout those layers, that's just that already shows that you're
for sure.
There's something there, something special about you, especially in MMA these days. But hoping that becomes the baseline, because with guys like Volkanovski and like Jose Aldo and all those other
Petr
super
Yan
elites,
too.
Petr Yan, if they become the baseline for how you gauge elite fighters, I think there's lots of growth to be had in the sport. And right now, because right now, if you look at MMA, like A-tier MMA is like, there's nothing else like it. B-tier MMA is already kind of you're already kind of like looking at some like wonkiness, looking at gaps there in skill sets, because like compared to other sports, like in boxing, A-tier boxing is obviously really good. B-tier boxing is still okay.
Yeah, because they have systems. They know how to teach that shit, and I think that's a big problem for defense in MMA, is that a lot of coaches do not have well-established teaching systems to make the when it comes to like fighters from Cuba and Russia, like they all have like very structured systems to learn how to box, and that's why their defense is so good. And I'm pretty sure in America it's the same. So, and that's one thing that is lacking in MMA. I'm pretty sure there's a few good coaches in MMA that have good like laid out systems for defense and how to teach it, because you can have a good defensive system and that does not mean you can teach that shit. Like
Yes,
maybe Jose Aldo cannot teach you how to defend.
yeah,
Like,
it's
you
different
never
skill
know.
sets.
Yeah.
Knowing a skill and knowing how to teach a skill is like completely different things.
Yeah, I
But,
think the level is getting a lot higher, especially in lower divisions. For example, in bantamweight, you see like unranked fighters moving their head, parrying, countering a lot more. Like the evolution has been amazing in the lower weight classes. Higher weight classes are moving along a little bit on the slower side, but you see
yeah,
some guys getting better. So it's promising. It's promising. Defense is one thing that it's like getting more and more fun to watch in MMA, I would say.
yeah, and beyond that, better defense leads to more exchanges, which makes the fights more fun to watch.
Exactly. Yeah.
Guys are more comfortable staying in there, staying in the kitchen, throwing shots. Okay, so do we try and cover the second question, or do we?
I think we should actually do a podcast.
Yeah,
I'm very interested in the topic, to be honest.
Yeah. So
yeah, but also I would like to do some research too. Like I think it would be better.
Actually, like having some basis to our claims. Yeah. So we need to prepare for it. So I guess stay tuned for the podcast that deals with globalization in MMA and cultural roots as a factor in growth of MMA. But yeah, all your questions have been great.
This was great. I had a lot of fun. I hope people like our answers.
Yeah.
Do you imagine if everyone was like, "Oh, that podcast fucking sucked."
What the fuck is this bullshit? I can't fucking understand a single thing they're saying. These foreigners.
No, like this is not Triran. Where the fuck is Daniel Martin? Like,
I mean, we kind of outlasted them by a while now. We've been producing more stuff than them in the last couple of years. So if there are people who say that, I think we can safely disregard them and find where they live, kick their ass, steal their belongings, and
their
steal
food,
their ID.
especially their food. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially their food, their credit card, and purchase a whole bunch of stuff. Anyway, before we devolve into like random crap, I guess.
You know what's the best part about making a Patreon podcast? You do not need to tell people to subscribe to your page.
Yeah. But actually, I'm kind of thinking that maybe we can release this episode as like publicly, and then the next one's like this is the thing.
So people know what to expect. Yeah.
Everything we do is like on the fly. We never plan the shit out. So the
overhaul was a lie. There's no overhaul.
There's no overhaul. There's no fucking overhaul. We're not planning anything. We're just kind of like making it up as we go along. But yeah, actually, genuinely, we are planning a new. We reworked the tiers, the Patreon tiers, and you can check them out on our Patreon page, obviously. And we're planning to launch a Ko-Fi where you will be able to make commissions, actual honest to goodness commissions. If you are interested in a topic that's you've never seen being examined before, or maybe it has been examined but not in the way you want it to, you will be able to go to our Ko-Fi page, pay a flat fee, and we'll give you you'll give us a deadline, and we'll give you an honest estimation of how quickly we can make this, and we'll fulfill the commission to the best of our ability. And we're going to release that stuff publicly, not paywalled. It's just going to be a commission.
Yeah.
And that's going to be our system from now on. We'll still obviously release stuff like, or out of enthusiasm. So it's not going to be.
Yeah, it's not going to be everything, but yeah, it's going to be good to give back to the people that have been supporting us, and having like a more structured way to fulfill their wishes. So
Yeah.
it's gonna
Because
be
it used-
more fair, yeah. Or
Yeah.
our old Patreon system was broken. I think we all know that by now, and we're trying to make everyone right with this one.
Yeah. We're trying to turn everyone into a right-wing nut with our content. Okay, so I guess that's it. See you on the next one. The next episode, I don't know if it's going to be me or Fenio. Probably, honestly, probably it will be.
Maybe someone else, but probably both of us. Yeah.
You're gonna shoot us more questions. Subscribe to the Patreon and get into the Discord. It's our biggest selling point these days. Like lots of cool people in there, lots of very smart people. Like obviously, as you can see in the questions, like very curious. People who wish to be intellectually stimulated and all that, maybe even sexually stimulated in some ways.
I'm not opposed to that.
To become a Discord kitten by paying $5 per month.
Become a Discord daddy with
Okay, so before I say any more incriminating shit, stay tuned for the Ko-Fi launch and stay tuned for more content. And yeah, this has been great. Looking forward to more questions from our subscribers. If you haven't used the opportunity to shoot us a question and you have something in mind, and if this prompted you to come up with another question, feel free. We'll make another announcement for a different podcast.
Also, give us feedback about this podcast. Did you guys like it? If you have any follow-up questions that you want to talk with any of us, you can always DM us on Discord. We are always available for you guys. I mean, not always, but we're gonna try to reach back to you guys. We can always chat if you want to talk about anything. Obviously, it is cool to have these discussions in a podcast because everyone gets to listen and we can get a feedback loop going on. But if you guys want to talk, we're there to talk. We may be bad people, but not in that way.
What are we gonna fucking call this thing?
The Patreon podcast.
The Fight Side Patreon podcast.
I think Christian and Spencer, those guys have great names for their podcast. And I'm just the piece of shit that is the preview podcast.
I mean, at least I have Tengri though.
Yeah, you have that. Yeah, I'm the boring name.
The rest is just the Fight Side MMA podcast, the Fight Side Preview podcast.
Okay, I'm gonna retitle the previews as the Suck My Dick podcast. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great name. Excellent name. Anyway, thanks everyone for your questions. I think it's enough of that bullshit before we keep talking on, before we say any more crap. Let's end this.
Okay, bye.
Goodbye.